Hi, David Lee here from StoriesThatChange.com and HumanNatureAtWork.com. I wanted to share with you an excerpt from an interview that I did with Greg Taylor, who's the co-founder of Steam Whistle Brewery in Toronto, Canada. I actually first heard about Steam Whistle from Ted Matthews, who features them in his outstanding book, Brand, It Ain't the Logo, which I absolutely love because we really resonate on the philosophy that branding isn't about having a great logo or clever tagline or great collateral material. So whether it's branding your product or service or your employer brand, that's not what your brand is about. Your brand is what people feel and think about you when they hear about you, when they interact with you. And the best and most powerful way of delivering your brand promise is to make sure you create an environment that both supports and inspires people to deliver that brand promise. It was funny, in interviewing Ted, he noted that Steam Whistle's motto is do one thing really, really well, because they decided to focus on brewing just one type of beer, a Pilsner, and doing that better than anybody else versus trying to be the best at multiple types of beer. But he said, even though they say their motto is do one thing really, really well, he laughed and said they really do everything really, really well, whether it comes to brewing a world-class beer or creating a world-class culture where employees deliver their brand promise. There's two stories that I want to share with you. The first one you'll hear is an example of an origin story, and it's actually part of Greg Taylor and Steam Whistle's origin story. I'll share more of their origin story later. And it's a great example of how to communicate why you do what you do and the personality and the mission behind your work and your business. The other story that I want to share with you is a great example of using a really simple story to make what is a common sense principle come alive and make it more sticky, to use the term of Made to Stick authors Chip and Dan Heath. Okay, enough of the background scoop. Let's hear these two stories and these excerpts from the interview.
You know, if you were to think of the three top things that Steam Whistle does to keep a strong culture as you've grown, and examples of those, what would that be?
Well, it's hard to define them in particular points, but what I can tell you, and you asked me to include some anecdotes, but anecdotes for me, they're so important. And one of the stories I tell, David, when I speak, especially to MBA students, is that I was a bike courier in 1988 and in Toronto here, and I met a girl who was working for a small craft brewery way back in the original craft renaissance. And she said that her boss, the president of the craft brewery, which was Upper Canada Brewing Company at the time in Toronto, had invited her to come to what she thought was a senior dinner at his house in an upscale area of Toronto. So she said she was allowed to bring her boyfriend. So I rode my bike up to his place and through these fancy homes and got to the front door and I had a tie on. I'm thinking about all my manners that my mom taught me, and knock on the door, and the door is ajar, and all I hear is music coming from inside the house, and I think, well, am I at the wrong place? But as I opened the door, I saw people I recognized, and I walked in and realized that there was a huge bash going off in this guy's house. He invited everyone from the brewery to his house. They're all there, and he's walking around talking to each person, spending time to get to know everybody, and he did that with me as well. I mean, I didn't work for the guy, right? And I'm thinking, this is the guy I want to work for. And so I worked away at getting a job there and started delivering beer in 1989 for him, and really learned a lot about this idea that happy employees can contribute to special products and in the end create great consumer loyalty. So, and his methods were pretty straightforward. Just treat everybody with respect and allow people to speak up about their concerns and ideas. Creating an environment like that isn't easy. So one of the ways we do it here is by having an office space that's open. And Cam and I started the company together, but we have the same desks as anyone else does. So, you know, if we have somebody coming in as an intern, they get the same setup as we do, and we sit in the same area. And we feel this is necessary because our whole idea is that creativity is staff creativity is one of our greatest assets, and that our staff are they are the closest to our brand, and they're the ones. Therefore, it's logical from our perspective, but they're the ones who are most likely going to come up with ideas that best suit the brand and that are exciting and innovative for our brand. So instead of having to go out to third parties, which we don't use third parties for anything here. We say to our staff, you guys are all capable of creating the future of this brand. All the ideas, all the changes, the evolvement of our business is going to come from you. And so you avoid having to bring a third party in and spend 3 days telling them all about your brand and then have them come back with ideas for you. For us, this is an alien idea. It's just a foreign concept because we have done so well over the last 13 years innovating through our own ideas from our staff. And what Frank used to tell us, who's that guy I mentioned earlier, invited me to his home, he used to say, you know, hiring a consultant is what you're doing really as simple as taking your watch off and giving it to a person and asking to tell you what time it is. Most of these things you can do yourselves, but you need to believe in that. And in particular with creative, people don't really believe they have the right to be creative. In fact, there's an industry that's been developed that says, hey, we're the creative people over here. You're not allowed to. You're not good enough. You don't know what creativity is. You don't have the personal skill set to come up with ideas that are going to make an impact on consumers. We just think that's bullshit. And so we have our own creative folks here. But it's not easy. You need to create an environment, David, where people are genuinely feeling confident that they can say, hey, Greg, hey, Cam, I thought about this the other day. So that means, you know, ensuring that none of the managers are overbearing and ensuring that they all get a chance to communicate regularly with them, requiring people to have sit-downs with their staff, not only officially, but, you know, one of the things we do is you have to have lunch with your staff on a regular basis, both individually and as a group, just to make sure that there's a connection there. And when it comes for new opportunities for strategic planning, the staff really need to be intimately involved in that stuff because they're locked inside their brains are questions and answers that we need to get. The old structure of the past businesses gets in the way of that, and here I'll give you a good example, and I'll let you talk after this, but we hired a guy from a larger brewery, a national brewer, as a marketing director here, and just a wonderful guy. He interviewed very well. But once we got him in, we realized the retraining process was pretty much impossible because he fought the idea, the simple idea, for example, that we would go into a strategic planning meeting and not high-level planning, just, you know, we want to run maybe a licensee promotion for our restaurants in Ontario for Oktoberfest. And so we'd get a key group of people together in the marketing area that, you know, a mix of folks that were excited to learn some ideas. And he said to me on his departure, he said, Greg, one of the most difficult things for me was I've been in the business for 18 years, and I started out with you guys. In the first couple of months, I realized when I sat around a table with a group of people with varied experiences, some of them only working there for a month, some of them have been working there for 13 years, with a young girl who'd only been there for 3 weeks who spoke up with an idea, I could see the weight of her idea had the same weight as mine. And from my background, you don't even get to speak up about ideas until you're 10 years in. And the senior people that are 17 years and 20 years in, all the ideas come from them. And I said, you understand, this makes no sense to us because our brand is tied to a demographic, a youth demographic. And the reason being is if we stick to the demographic that we had when we first opened the business, so the 20-year-olds that we had when we first opened the business, 13 years later, they're all 33. 20-year-olds are drinking 2-4 a week. 33-year-olds are drinking a 12-pack to a 6-pack a week. So if you age with that demographic, you're going out of business. So what we need to do is we need to develop an understanding and a relationship with the 20 to 25-year-olds. We need to be relevant to them. So when we go into a room and ask ideas, what we could do to achieve this, does it make sense to not listen to the 22-year-old girl and listen to the 39-year-old guy? How's that going to work? What do you know about what a 22-year-old is thinking? So that's why we're not saying your ideas are no good, but her ideas should be listened to with the same relevance as yours. So anyway, that was one of the challenges he had, and it bothered him enough that it made it difficult for him to be happy working with us. And he left for several reasons, but that was one of the examples.
Okay, let's do a brief debrief on those two stories. So think about Greg's story about going to that party of the person who would be his future boss. Now, by sharing that party, what he saw, what he heard, and the impact it had on him, doesn't it make you understand at a deeper level why Steam Whistle Brewery is so committed to having a great culture? And it also helps you connect at a more person-to-person level with Greg, versus if he just said, sort of cliche, we believe having a great culture is our number one asset or our most important strategy, or some type of typical business speak cliche. But hearing that story really makes it real, and again helps you bond with Greg. So you want to share your origin story, the reason why you do what you do, or the reason behind your philosophy of your business. It also, because stories are more memorable, you'll remember that story more likely than you would a simple cliche tagline. Now, the story about the young woman in the strategy meeting and the marketing person who was sort of flabbergasted by the value that Steam Whistle put in her opinion, again, notice how if Greg had simply said, we value all employees' input, all employees' input is important to us. Again, things that are characteristics of world-class companies, and your company should do, but very likely isn't, if I may be cheeky enough to say that. So that's a truism that you know. Now, if he had simply said that, again, it'd be like, all right, tell me something I don't know. By simply embedding that message in that simple little story where the marketing manager, director was baffled, it makes it come alive and it makes it real. And so that's an example of a story that I would recommend Steam Whistle using as part of their recruiting, their hiring process, any type of employer branding material, because it captures in a live way an important part of their ethos. And so what it means to you is, if you're involved in employer branding, is capture those simple stories that make the organizational values and norms real and make them come alive. So it separates you from all the other employers who simply spout off cliches that any other employer could also use. So hopefully the takeaway message of these two short stories is, in general, again, the power of stories to make ideas much more interesting and much more memorable, and then also specifically using an origin story to bond with people, potential clients, customers, employees, etc., and then making your employer brand more real and more compelling by using short stories to communicate that, versus just abstract terms like employee input matters, or we believe in the dignity of every person, etc. So hope you take that to heart and use it to make your communication much stickier, much more powerful.